The demon spirit licked its lips, laughing as Kofi stared into the eyes of the terrified boy. He could see the fear in the child's eyes, the knowing of the evil that was about to happen. "Your child or this one," the demon rasped. "You know what you have to do." Kofi closed his eyes. It was better to avoid the boy's eyes as he began the deadly ritual. Finally, the truth sunk in. He had become the devil's servant. Be warned, dear listener, for this is a tale of the monsters we create through fear and the cost of a community's silence. Beneath the ancient baobab tree, a dark secret loomed, hidden behind the revered name of Chief Kofi Dagan. His wealth flowed like an unending river, but it came at a price whispered only by shadows. A towering figure with an aura of quiet authority, his wealth overflowed in ways that defied reason. His granaries swelled, his fields bore fruit even in times of drought, and his home, a sprawling mansion atop the hill, radiated prosperity. To the villagers, he was a miracle worker, a spiritual guide who healed their sick and gave orphans a place to call home. But deep within Chief Kofi's imposing frame stirred a darkness so profound, it stained the very soil beneath his feet. Years ago, Kofi's joy had been bound to a single light, his young son, Sefa. The boy's laughter could turn storms into sunbeams, and his curious eyes brimmed with golden threads of infinite potential. But one fateful harvest season, Sefa vanished. The villagers searched, their torches lighting up the night, but the boy was gone. Days later, a shadowy figure appeared to Kofi, an ancient spirit with eyes like empty graves. "Your son now walks the path of my hunger," the spirit rasped, "but I will leave you a choice. Continue your lineage with your daughter, Amma, or lose her to the same fate." Kofi, shattered and desperate, begged for mercy. The spirit grinned and offered him a dark bargain. "Feed me the essence of youth, and I will spare her. With each youthful heart you give me, I will grant you wealth beyond imagining." Reluctantly, the deal was struck. The spirit fused itself into Kofi's very being. His body contorted, a searing heat coursing through his veins as dark tendrils lashed out from within, gripping his heart with an unyielding chill. The night air carried his agonized screams, silencing even the crickets. When the torment ceased, Kofi rose, his once compassionate eyes now glowing faintly, a golden sheen betraying the monster lurking inside. From that day, golden threads glimmered around children in his eyes, threads of potential futures that the spirit demanded he harvest. And so began Kofi's dual life, the beloved chief and spiritual guide, and the demon servant who fed on the brightest futures to preserve his own. The chief's mansion became a sanctuary for the village's children, a place where desperate parents brought their little ones with hope in their hearts, orphans with no place to go, prodigies whose talents promised future glory, and sick children in need of healing were all delivered to his doorstep. "Heal my child," a mother weeping over her ailing child would say. "Teach him how to be a man," another would chirp, patting his son on the head. Parents arrived with gifts of food, cloth, and even livestock, their eyes shining with gratitude and ambition. Many secretly hoped aligning their children with a man of Kofi's wealth and status would elevate their own standing in the village. They whispered to each other of his generosity, seeing him as a savior and a path to fortune. When the children first arrived, the mansion seemed like a dream come true. The orphans marveled at the warm beds and endless food, while the prodigies explored rooms filled with books and instruments. Laughter rang through the halls as they played and shared stories of the bright futures they imagined. But soon, subtle changes crept in. The children began to notice the shadows in the corners of the rooms, moving when no one else was around. Whispers floated through the mansion at night, speaking in voices they could not recognize. For those with the brightest futures, the change was most pronounced. Kofi would often spend hours watching them, his eyes fixed on the golden threads only he could see. He would call them to his study, where the air grew heavy and the walls seemed to pulse faintly. There he would speak in soft, soothing tones, praising their talents while probing their deepest fears. What began as encouragement turned into something more sinister. The warmth of the mansion grew oppressive, and the children who once thrived there started to wither, their laughter replaced by unease. Many, however, were genuinely healed, their ailments cured with herbal remedies and spiritual chants, and these children left the mansion as symbols of Kofi's benevolence. Yet the brightest children, the ones whose potential shimmered most vividly, never returned. Among them was Kweku, a boy whose melodies could make even the hardest hearts weep. When he first arrived at the mansion, his excitement was infectious. Kweku's eyes widened at the sight of the grand piano in the hall, its polished surface gleaming under the light of the chandelier. "Is this mine to play?" he asked, his voice trembling with awe. Kofi nodded, his lips curling into a smile that masked his sinister intent. Kweku's songs filled the mansion with a bittersweet melody that seemed to breathe life into its oppressive halls. Servants paused to listen, and even the shadows seemed to retreat in the face of his vibrant spirit. Kofi watched from the shadows, his gaze fixed on the golden threads shimmering around the boy. They were the brightest he had ever seen, and the spirit within him purred with hunger. Over days, Kofi showered Kweku with praise and small gifts, drawing the boy closer. He encouraged Kweku to compose a special piece, promising that his music would be remembered for generations. The boy worked tirelessly, his passion ignited by the chief's words. But as Kweku's melody reached its peak, Kofi's intentions grew darker. One evening, Kofi invited Kweku to perform his masterpiece for him in the grand hall. Just the two of them, he said, so he could see if Kweku's music was ready for the world to hear. The room was adorned with flickering candles, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. As Kweku played, his fingers dancing over the keys, the music became otherworldly, almost hypnotic. The air grew thick, and the walls seemed to pulse with anticipation. Kofi stepped forward, his face a mask of feigned pride. "You've surpassed all expectations, my boy," he said, placing a hand on Kweku's shoulder. But as the final note lingered in the air, the room grew cold. Kofi tightened his grip, and the spirit's voice whispered, "Now." The boy's eyes widened in terror as the shadows in the room surged forward, encircling him. Kofi hesitated, a fleeting memory of his own son flashing through his mind. But the spirit snarled, its grip on his heart tightening. "Do you wish to lose Amma as well?" it hissed. With tears streaming down his face, Kofi forced the boy to continue playing, the shadows whipping around Kweku furiously, each note draining Kweku's vitality. When the melody faded into silence, Kofi knelt beside the boy's lifeless body. He plucked Kweku's heart, now glowing with unrealized potential, and nestled it into his ribcage. The orb pulsed faintly as Kofi rose, his own voice now carrying the haunting beauty of Kweku's song. The mansion seemed to sigh with satisfaction, its walls absorbing the boy's essence into their grotesque fabric. You see, Kofi's mansion was no ordinary home. Shadows seemed to cling to its walls, moving like whispers just out of sight. Each room bore a sinister presence. The library whispered secrets stolen from scholarly children, while the kitchen's hearth radiated warmth fueled by the souls of nurturing ones. The mansion's walls were alive, pulsing faintly as if breathing, for they were infused with the fleshy essence of the children Kofi had sacrificed. Each harvest season brought new demands. To ensure bountiful crops, Kofi's rituals grew more elaborate. Dancing children were made to dance until their limbs gave way, their terror enriching the demon's feast. Others were buried left beneath the fields, their cries muffled by layers of soil as their suffering seeped into the land, ensuring its unnatural fertility. As the years passed, the village began to whisper. Too many children had vanished, and while Chief Kofi's mansion flourished, so did their unease. Yet, greed kept them silent. The chief's wealth benefited all, a new well here, a lavish festival there. Who could question such generosity? The villagers' unease simmered for years, whispers of missing children growing louder with each passing harvest. Yet, the chief's wealth cast a long shadow over their doubts. When parents occasionally asked to see their children, Kofi offered carefully crafted excuses. "They are thriving under my care," he would say, with a serene smile. "Your child's talents are blossoming, and soon they will return as a beacon of hope for this village." His words, coupled with the visible success of the few children who did leave, quelled their fears. Still, some mothers wept at night, their instincts warning them of something amiss. It wasn't until a season of relentless drought, when even Kofi's fields began to falter, that the uneasy murmurs turned into outright suspicion. During a community farming ritual meant to invoke the gods' favor for rain, another child vanished. The boy, a prodigy known for his knowledge of herbs, had been seen last entering Kofi's mansion. "Where is my son?" his mother cried, her voice cutting through the tense air. Kofi placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke with feigned sorrow. "The gods have called him to a higher purpose," he said, his tone carrying the weight of authority. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances but dared not confront him further, fearing the wrath of both the gods and their benefactor. As the drought dragged on, desperation pushed the villagers past denial. They began to notice patterns. The brightest children always went missing, and Kofi's wealth grew in tandem. Whispers turned into demands for answers. Fear mingled with outrage as they finally dared to scrutinize the man who held their trust. Sensing the rising tide of suspicion, Kofi devised a grand distraction. He announced a celebration, his daughter Amma's wedding, timed with the final harvest. "Let us come together in joy and unity," he declared, "to remind ourselves of the blessings we still have." The promise of feasting and festivities was enough to quell the villagers' doubts for a time. Desperate for a reprieve from their suffering, they flocked to the event, unaware that beneath the surface Kofi's plans were steeped in darkness and deceit. The village gathered, desperate for joy amid the famine. As the drums thundered and the dancers moved in hypnotic swirls, Chief Kofi stood at the center of the grand celebration, his hands raised to silence the crowd. "Today, we celebrate life and unity in our village," he began, his voice steady, yet laden with an undercurrent of unease. The villagers cheered, unaware of the storm about to break. As Kofi took a step back, the earth trembled beneath their feet. Gasps rippled through the crowd as fissures snaked across the ground, splitting the polished stone floor of the mansion. Kofi's body convulsed violently, and before anyone could reach him, his flesh tore apart in grotesque bursts. From the wounds emerged slithering, worm-like creatures, their segmented bodies glistening with slime. Each creature bore the face of a lost child, their expressions frozen in eternal torment. Their mouths opened in unison, releasing a cacophony of screams that pierced the air like shards of glass. The villagers clutched their ears, many collapsing to their knees, overwhelmed by the chilling wails. The mansion's walls began to twist and writhe as if alive, revealing the grotesque truth hidden within. Faces of the missing children pushed against the pulsating walls made of flesh, their eyes wide with horror and their mouths twisted in silent screams. The golden threads of possibility that Kofi had stolen blazed brightly in his chest, burning through his skin as the spirit's voice thundered, "You fool! Their god's eyes are upon us. Sacrificing that child on their ritual day makes them think you are mocking them. You sought to deceive them, but their wrath now burns through you, as it does through me. Useless. Such dull futures you stole to sustain me, mediocrity cloaked in promise. Your stupidity and incompetence have starved me, and now their fury scorches even my essence. I should have taken your daughter, but to save myself, you will do nicely. Now, you will take their place in eternal torment." Kofi's hollow screams echoed through the night, a chilling harmony with the wails of the children's faces etched into the worm-like creatures. His body twisted and contorted as if resisting the inevitable, his hands clawing at his own flesh in a futile attempt to halt the transformation. The golden threads of possibility he had stolen erupted from his chest, each one burning like molten fire, searing his skin, as they unraveled into the air. The spirit's voice thundered in mockery. "Do you feel it now, Kofi? The weight of the futures you devoured, now consuming you in turn." "But I only did as you asked," Kofi screamed, clawing at the worm-like creatures erupting from his flesh. The spirit's voice laughed as it consumed the last of Kofi's skin. "Yes, but what I asked was evil. And now, you are evil too." Kofi's legs gave way, and he fell to his knees. The villagers could only watch in horror as his face began to warp, his features melting into the mass of writhing creatures emerging from his torso. Each worm bore a child's face, their eyes wide with unspoken accusations. They crawled over his collapsing form, dragging pieces of him into their grotesque procession. The mansion itself seemed to mourn its master. The walls pulsated violently, shedding chunks of flesh-like material that dissolved into the earth. The roof buckled, the beams groaning as if in agony, before the entire structure crumbled into a heap of writhing, slime-covered remnants. Kofi's final scream was swallowed by the cacophony of cracking stone and the anguished cries of the children's faces, leaving behind an unnatural silence. All that remained was a grotesque steaming crater where the mansion once stood, a horrifying testament to the evil that had thrived there. The horror and revelations of that day left the village to grapple with its complicity. Shame and sorrow weighed heavily on their hearts as they realized the depth of their betrayal, not just of the children, but of their own values. Parents wept openly, haunted by the memories of those they had trusted Kofi to protect. Elders, once his staunchest supporters, felt the bitter sting of regret for their silence, knowing their greed had blinded them to the horrors. The air in the village grew heavy with mourning, as each person faced the painful truth that their blind faith and shared avarice had enabled such evil. The land remained corrupted, its fields barren and its waters tainted. The villagers, once united by prosperity, were now bound by shared guilt. Amma reeled from the revelation of his actions. The weight of her family's shame pressed heavily upon her, and the villagers' distrust was palpable. "She is Kofi's daughter," they whispered. "How can we trust her?" Amma, determined to atone for her father's sins, addressed the village with tears in her eyes. "I did not know of his deeds," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "But I will spend my life undoing the harm he caused." At first, her words were met with skepticism, but Amma's actions spoke louder. She opened the mansion's treasures to the people, giving away her father's ill-gotten riches to the poor and destitute. She tore down the mansion's grotesque remnants with her own hands, leading the community in rituals to cleanse the land of its darkness. The air filled with the fragrant smoke of burning sage and sacred herbs as villagers chanted prayers for forgiveness and renewal. In a final symbolic act, Amma gathered the ashes of the mansion's remains and scattered them into the barren fields. She planted seeds in their place, inviting every villager to join her. "These seeds represent a new beginning," she declared. "Together, we will nurture this land with honesty and unity." Slowly, the village began to heal. Amma's selflessness and determination earned the trust of even her father's harshest critics. She transformed her father's legacy of greed into one of peace and integrity, uniting the community in a shared mission to rebuild. The fields, once tainted, began to bloom again, their fertile soil a testament to the power of collective redemption and a vow never to sacrifice integrity for wealth again. What about you, dear viewer? When have you witnessed collective silence in the face of wrongdoing? What would you have done if you suspected something was wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and let's discuss how integrity can shape our communities as we learn from more folktales from African mythology.